Hello, people, and welcome to Tema Talks. This podcast is brought to you by the Tema Memorial Trust, which is Canada's leading provider of peer support, family assistance, education, and training for all of our emergency services, public safety, military personnel, and their families. Check them out at tema.ca. The views, opinions, and endorsements expressed in each podcast episode are mine and my guests alone, and do not necessarily reflect the official position of the Tema Memorial Trust. Lastly, the subject matter of this podcast may be triggering to some of our listeners, so please make sure that you're in a calm and positive headspace before you listen so that you can get the most out of it. I appreciate it. Okay? All right. How y'all doing? I hope you're doing good. I'm doing fine. As I record this, it's just a day after the tragic event in Toronto, and like the tragic event in Humboldt, I just want to send out my thoughts to all those who are affected, the families of the injured, and of course of the people that died as a result, the community, of course, of the Greater Toronto Area. Also thinking of all the first responders that may be affected negatively by this event and who may need support, as they did with after the Humboldt event. The Tema Memorial Trust has created a funding opportunity, a support opportunity for the first responders that may be affected by the events in Toronto. So go to tema.ca and check that out, and if you would like to, you can contribute, and we're putting together a fund in case any of them need it. So, great work by Tema, as always. Proud to be part of that organization. All right. My guest this episode is Wendy Lund. She is the CEO and founder of Wellth Management Inc. That's WELLTH Management Incorporated. When I was at the Tema Gala, as you're going to hear, many people came up to me and said, I have to get this lady on. So I made a point to do so. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know you're going to as well. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right to it.
It was a dark and stormy night, nor'easter rolling in.
Welcome to Tema Talks, Wendy. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I appreciate you taking the time. Wendy, I recently met you during the Tema week recently in Toronto, and what I can tell you is I had about at least a half a dozen people run up to me and say, you have to have this woman on your podcast.
Aww.
So I'm really excited to learn more about you because I didn't know you before that Tema week, and I'm learning as well as all of our listeners about you. So I'm really excited to get to know more.
I'm really excited to share more.
Perfect. That's excellent. So, Wendy, give us a little bit of your origin story, how you grew up, where you grew up, and all that kind of good stuff.
Well, I was born in Calgary, so yay, Western Canada, but mostly raised in Toronto. I'm a nurse by trade, not a first responder.
Nurses are first responders. They are.
That's true, but more in the education field.
Right,
so I've been raising paramedics for the last 20 years at Centennial College, teaching the sciences. So my background is really anatomy and physiology and pharmacology. I'm kind of the teacher you probably didn't like to go to for the hard stuff in school.
You hurt my brain. You would hurt my brain.
I know, I did. And I've been called the humbler. I'm known for, I think, really good teaching, but also really horribly difficult exams. So,
well, that sounds like fun. That's great.
Yeah, so I did that for 32 years as a professor, and then I retired just last June. I always say I didn't marry well, but I divorced better. So I got to retire a little early and do what I really feel passionate about, which is helping first responders, well, all people, to be honest. But my first love is first responders, to take better care of their mental well-being proactively.
What led you to that? What led you to that as a passion, do you think?
So about 10 years ago in my own life, a lot of stuff happens, as life normally does for all of us. And I fell into a mindfulness course. A girlfriend sent me to an MBSR course, which stands for Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. Anybody who's listening, you can Google that, and there's likely to be a resource in your community for that.
Okay.
It's a mindfulness-based 2 hours a week for 8 weeks, and I leaned into it and found it very, very good going through a divorce after 23 years of marriage and 3 kids, which is a tough time.
Absolutely.
Because it was so effective, and because I'm a science teacher in my bones, I kept sort of picking up books and wondering, why is this working so well? And then I really got to know the neuroendocrine response, not just to stress in our bodies and biology of the stress response, but what it looks like when you do proactive training on the mind. And then I was like, I have to bring this to my paramedic students. So about 8 years ago on the side, and listen, nobody was talking about mindfulness in the first responder community.
No.
And when you bring stuff like that new, it can be very risky. It takes a lot of courage, and balls to bring stuff to people that you think might, not be really warmed up to it. So I started talking about mindfulness in the faculty, and I was the only female in the faculty, and I'm like, we really should bring this to the student body. And they would literally either laugh or like try to fall asleep on me in a meeting. They would, kind of ridicule me in my passionate ways. And so a girlfriend of mine and I did a 3-week little intervention with students right before their OSCEs. They were highly stressed about getting through these. So we offered a little intervention.
Sorry, Wendy, what's an OSCE for people that don't know?
So when you do practical testing, so when students show up and do a scenario and they get, they either stay in the program based on those 15 minutes times 5 or they're out.
Right.
So really high stakes, big pressure. You can be academically gifted and fail on your OSCE day and you're out of the program.
Right.
So we offered a little intervention. 17 students signed up for it, and they loved it so much they asked us to continue on, and we did for the rest of the year. That was in October. And then we offered it again the next year. And within 2 to 3 years, it became a full-fledged student association called Mindful Medics. We had our own logo. And we saw upwards of 75 students come out every week on their own, on their 1-hour lunch break to meet with me and talk about resiliency, compassion, and mindfulness. So I knew I was on to something, despite the older gang thinking it was too far out there, that, nobody would resonate with it. Don't call it mindfulness. People don't want that. I kind of stuck with it. And what I found to be really beneficial was leading with the science.
Right.
So I talk about, this is your brain on stress and this is your brain on mindfulness and compassion. People tend to listen. And so I brought what historically can be seen as hippy-dippy woo-woo and made it practical and appropriate and accessible to first responders.
Now, I wrote some notes down. So in the bio that you sent me, it says that you said that you're one of 30 to 40 people in the world with a graduate degree in mindfulness studies.
Yes, I am.
So, and everybody throws that word out, mindfulness. I've thrown it out. I've used it. Explain to us what mindfulness means, really.
It's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. And the reason I went back to do a graduate degree at this age was to really give some credential to it, because there's a lot of McMindfulness out there. People who use it who may not really don't understand the theoretical underpinnings and really the potential risk of doing some mindfulness practice, especially in a vulnerable sector like the first responders. You have to be careful because you don't know people's trauma histories. And it's not necessarily, the safest thing to do is to throw somebody in a closed-eye meditation. So I'm always careful to preface that. Sorry, your question was again, I got sidetracked there.
That's perfect. What mindfulness is or what it means.
So by definition, the most cited definition is the ability to pay attention in this moment in a particular way, on purpose and non-judgmentally, which sounds really simple, but the research...
It's not simple. I can tell you, for me, it's not simple. It's one of the hardest things I deal with.
About 46% of the time, they estimate that we are present, which means we spend the rest of our time dwelling in the past, where anxiety or depression lives, and in the future where anxiety resides. And so our minds are designed to do that. And then as first responders, our brains naturally threat detect, and then we sign up to become a first responder, and then we vocationally train our brain to extra threat detect and to catastrophize and get ready for worst case scenarios. And you lay down neuronal pathways that are very easy to take. So first responders are very vulnerable because they become very trained in a habitual mindset of looking for threat, thinking about threat, anticipating threat.
Right.
And so if you teach people to be present and come back to the moment non-judgmentally, you have to sort of rewire the brain to do that. And if you're present, you can't be worried about the future. You can't be thinking and ruminating about the call you did last week. And so when you catch your mind replaying and stirring up the muck, which might be making you feel unwell emotionally or psychologically, you can train your brain to stop, take a breath, get regrounded in the present moment, and stay there. And when you do, you generally feel better. And that's different than being, the discerning clinician that, thinks ahead and looks at things critically. We're not talking about stopping that part of your brain, but it's when you sort of are not in working mode, how does your brain settle back down? And are you ruminating and replaying shit, or can you be present? And then when you're present, you get to have a choice about what you want to think or do next because you're present and you're not on an automated pathway in your brain.
Yeah, one thing that you just reminded me when you were talking. So the training that we all get now, and it relates to the comments that a lot of people make. And the comment is this: that you knew what you signed up for. So yes, to a certain point, we do. We chose to go into this field. We got trained to do our job, and we got told what that job may entail. But we are not trained adequately enough to know, and I don't know if there's a way to totally do it actually until you experience it, what the emotional and mental weight of your choice is going to be. So true. And listen, that's probably true for many things in life.
Yeah. I'm a mother of three. You think you know what mothering is till someone, hands you an infant. And 24/7 for the next 20 years, you're on call. So you don't know what it's like until you're in something. And so I think I sent you that tweet about, you're right, we teach people exquisitely to respond medically. The training is excellent. But as a front row seat, as a faculty member, I could see that we were doing nothing to prepare them emotionally. And I can't prepare you for one particular call, but that doesn't negate that we have an ethical and moral responsibility to teach people to fundamentally prepare a resilient brain that has the same equipped skills to deal with strong emotions that come up. It's not the call, it's the emotions that arise in a call that are, of concern for a first responder. Of course, we can name the top 10 types of calls that, garner lots of attention now for CISM. But I'm concerned about, the ones that don't make the top 10 and the cumulative stress and the other stressors that every first responder, because you're human, goes through life experiencing, the stuff that happens in your personal life that might be eroding your professional resiliency, stuff that's happening in the organization that's wearing down on you. It might be the supervisor, not even the call. And so I always really try to push for a systematic approach to building resiliency. If we say to first responders, listen, I'm going to train you up on resiliency, and so now it's your job to be more resilient. If we do that without looking at the organization and managers and systems and dispatch and say, what are the problems that burden our first responders, we run the risk of pathologizing first responders to make it their job only to be resilient. Right. So it's not always the call or the patient, but the system that creates these tremendous burdens that can erode the resiliency that we're trying to, keep first responders on top of.
Absolutely. The other point that you reminded me of too when you were just talking there is that, we try to go through, we think about past experiences, past calls, and it becomes uncomfortable, so we tend to shy away from it. What I'm starting to learn or starting to buy into, for me personally, is that there is no growth without discomfort.
Very true.
You have to go through some discomfort. You have to embrace the discomfort in order to grow.
I see that, as an educator, I would talk to, and I think it can start day one in school. Imagine if your entire undergraduate training looked like this. Every time you did a call in lab for, simulation or for practice, you had a teacher and a mentor that said, or who recognized that you were struggling and then just stopped and said, what was that like? So what's going through your mind? How are you feeling? What are you going to do when you come up with that feeling again? And never mind the pathway. That stuff can be taught. But we don't ask people, like, what's going on in your mind? What made that difficult for you? And then how do you deal with that next time? And can you have awareness about that? I don't think it's a big onerous thing. I don't think you need a master's in science of mindfulness to be able to do that. I think we just need to expand what we do for developing skills to include well-being skills, what our thinking is doing.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been a life changer for me. That would have been a career changer if my education had gone like that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on a mission to change that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So, I also read that you did your research dissertation, I think I said that right, was called Name It, Tame It, Frame It. Talk to me about that.
So I'm ashamed to say how long it took me to come up with that title. So writing, the irony for me is that dissertation, was so incredibly difficult for me. And the irony of writing on resiliency and suffering for several years doing it was a bit ironic. But Name It, Tame It, Frame It were the three main sort of themes that came out of my qualitative research, which means I interviewed 21 paramedics across Ontario in 4 or 5 different services and asked them to speak about their experiences with trauma. And then as a researcher in qualitative, you kind of look for all the bits that they tell you and then what are some of the similar themes. So globally, it was Name It, which really spoke to what did the paramedics talk about when they spoke about trauma? How did they describe it? What were the factors that made it difficult? What made it easy? Things like when it was personal, they all unanimously said when the call got personal, it got difficult. And that changed with the person's experience, right? So somebody who could handle a pediatric call before they became a father themselves, it changes when you now have a child a similar age and you show up for a call. Then they spoke about how they handled the call. And I had an exclusionary criteria of no suffering from PTSD for my study because I didn't feel I was equipped to handle a trigger and I didn't want to add to somebody's suffering. And I was really looking for what I bumped my thesis up against, which is the salutogenic perspective, which is a word I know is not part of most people's.
Say that again slowly for me.
Salutogenesis, which looks like salute.
Right.
Ogenesis,
Okay.
Which is a fancy word that just means the creation of health. Because look, we can look at statistics for first responders and say, my God, there's a lot of you suffering. In comparison to the general population, the statistics don't look good. But I look at it, that's a pathogenic viewpoint. So we look at it and go, oh my, that's terrible. But I look at it after all these years of working with first responders and go, why don't all of you have PTSD? So salutogenic, I say, there's something pretty resilient about you guys. And if we could tap into what it is that you do well, you self-subscribe. I think you're highly resilient as a group going into this profession. So let's try to find what's working. And I really saw it in my participants. They spoke about some really incredible taming, but framing. That was my last one. So these medics impressed me so much about how they framed their job. And one of them said, if you believe the brochure, you're going to be in trouble. And I remember thinking that's so true. If you go in and buy into the framework of, I'm a hero, I will save you, that is my job. And when I don't do that, I'm going to suffer because I have failed. And we teach them that that is their job. And as opposed to, what do you do? They all spoke about the bullshit call. Every one of my participants inevitably went from their worst trauma to say, but you know what really bugs me is when you show up and somebody's got their bags packed and waiting at the door and they've got a hangnail.
Yeah.
But that makes sense to me because we don't train them in undergraduate to deal with a pathway that speaks to isolation and loneliness and despair. those aren't medical issues. They're, they're crises of spirit. And so we send medics into these, quote unquote bullshit calls. But imagine if we had taught you to frame these as a pathway to say, look, this might be somebody who's just lonely and maybe they're isolated. And now what do I do as a first responder in the case of isolation and despair or loneliness? And if you had the tools to do with that, you probably wouldn't be so frustrated by the growing number of people out there who don't have resources themselves and tap into our, 911 system to deal with that.
Yeah, and you mentioned, why don't all first responders have PTSD? And when I look back, when I was still working as a paramedic and a communications officer, I look back and there's a few people that I can think of that, in my mind, do this well or that have this figured out. And the one common thing, or there's not one common thing, but a few common things that I see is that they're really active, like physically active outside of work. They have really good family and friend connections. They have hobbies that are not connected to EMS. Like there's things that I've seen that these people have that seem to build up or seem to make them more naturally resilient, if that makes sense.
So the theory of salutogenesis and logotherapy, another one, and I've put them all together with mindfulness theory to create the certificate program. And fundamentally, again, it's not that you're not knowledgeable as first responders about this. It's just that we've not shared that there's actually biology and psychology to mental wellness. And so it's separate to me than physical. So those who go for a run and go eat nutritiously and get good sleep, those are great things to tend to our physical body.
Right.
But we do almost nothing to train people and educate them on how do you handle the thoughts that go through your mind. We all have a self-critic. We all ruminate. We all have emotions that arise. But nobody teaches us, what do you do with them? How do you effectively calm them on your own? What resources do you need to understand that this is a normal reaction, not a pathological reaction to trauma?
Yeah.
And even understanding what's normal after a bad call can be therapeutic for somebody to know, okay, this is what I should expect, and this is likely to happen for the next week or two, but here's when I need to go seek help. So we don't pathologize the trauma experience either, that we give them as much information about what to expect in really difficult calls.
Wendy, you've sent me a quote, and I'm gonna say it, and hopefully I get this right, but it was a really, really good quote, one of the best that I've seen as far as this situation, this issue goes. And it's when it goes like this: when you teach first responders how to manage a difficult airway, you save patients' lives. When you teach them how to handle difficult emotions, you save theirs.
I know. When I wrote that,
blew my mind when I read that.
I know. As I wrote it on I thought, this is the tweet of my life. It probably is, and it's really my thesis in 140 characters.
Yeah.
But that was my mission. So, that's the gift of me having a position as a faculty member. I've been able to see this profession from a very privileged spot, like from novice, from day one. And I can see what's missing. And now I have strategies for how we can build that into curriculum. And in the same way we train them so beautifully to manage difficult pathophysiology and difficult airways, we can just teach them how to manage a difficult emotion. Imagine what that would do if that was just base curriculum.
It's such a simple solution to deal with a complicated issue.
Yeah.
It sounds simple. I know it's not simple to implement, but in some ways it is. It's just doing it. It's just stop talking about it and do it.
Well, it goes with, we stigmatize mental health, but I think we stigmatize mindfulness and compassion.
Yeah, it seems, people say mindfulness, people, all the tree huggers or the
granola mindfulness.
Yeah, granola, and all the yoga people, they all use mindfulness, which isn't a bad thing, but for some reason we sort of label it like that. And, and I have nothing bad to say about yoga people, because I've recently tried yoga myself and realized its benefits. I thank Teresa Coulter for that. She's the one who got me into that and make sure I stay on track. But we sort of label it like that, and make it seem like it's like a sort of hokey pokey thing, but it's not.
And what I try to bring to the table is even before you need to do yoga, because I'm not even a yogi master. And listen, there's a lot of people doing downward facing dog who are angry as, AF. I was about to say that. You know what I mean? So it doesn't, just because you put your body into a pose doesn't mean you're mindful.
Right.
You could be, ruminating like crazy in a yoga class, or angry, or thinking about your dinner recipe. It doesn't translate to a mindfulness practice. Hopefully it does if you embrace it fully and the philosophy behind it. And it's one pathway to it. But there's a million other pathways that I think people don't get can be powerful. For example, the best thing I think you can do to start a mindfulness practice to build proactive resiliency is to practice gratitude. And I mean serious, formal way where it becomes, because when you train the mind to be negatively threat detecting all the time or ruminating, you need to train the mind to look for the good, because we are so ingrained, and first responders are, notorious for recounting the worst call, and they share it and they repeat it. And I know that there's a philosophy that helps you guys discharge with each other, but I would also suggest you should start encouraging others to share your best calls.
Yeah.
What makes this an amazing job for you? What moment was amazing where you felt connection and purpose with a patient? When did you make a difference? Regardless of the circumstances or outcome for the patient, there's an opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah. You mentioned gratitude, and and again, it sounds so simple, but it's hard to do. And I mentioned Teresa before. Last year, Teresa challenged me, like over texting with her, for 10 days in a row, I had to text her something I'm grateful for, and she would do the same thing. And I can tell you, it's not easy. It wasn't easy for me to do that, but I did see a benefit from doing it. It certainly changed my mindset a little bit each day. I could see that.
And that's called neuroplasticity. So the science behind that is, and of course it's uncomfortable because you don't do it, but I can tell you it is the largest pillar of my 10-year practice, is gratitude practice. All day long, I'd say the majority of my day is spent in gratitude practice, which is just meaning in the background of my mind, when I walk up the stairs, I give thanks each step because I have a brother who doesn't walk and is in a wheelchair. And so he sharpens my gratitude pencil, because despite having maybe an arthritic knee one day or some uncomfortable, I get to get up and walk without effort.
Right.
And it takes him an hour to go to the bathroom. So when you practice gratitude and shift and go, thank you, and when you get that good at it, you can be in a moment of difficulty and a moment of adversity, and reflexively your brain will quickly shift to thank you for this at least. Even in this moment of difficulty, I'm grateful that I have a family, this person in my life, this job, a paycheck, whatever. But you've got to build those neuronal pathways. And that's called rewiring your brain, or neuroplasticity.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Wendy, you are the CEO and founder of Wellth, and it's Wellth, Wellth Management Inc. Tell us a little bit about that.
So when I left my career as an educator, I sort of thought, I think I've got enough to offer people in a company to really take the show on the road, so that I'm not constrained by, the job of being a professor in programs. So Wellth Management is really taking what I know, all of it, the science, the biology, the psychology of resiliency, of how we frame stress, and help people to find a path that resonates, offer them everything I know in hopes that they'll try some of it to build a better path proactively before things become a problem.
Yeah, well said. And that's what's so hard to do if you're not in that habit of doing it. And through this, or through your work with this, I assume that you've trademarked a certificate program called Reach for Resiliency.
Yeah, so R for R, which I know is very close to R2MR, but it's R for R. So we launched that through TEMA. I've got a collaborative relationship with TEMA, where I offer it reduced to first responders through them. And I didn't want to do a one-off, because you can go to a seminar for a day and be inspired, and I can do a great job at, giving you information, but it's not going to change your life. It's not going to, promote practice. So I wanted to do something that was more meaningful. So R4R is a 4-workshop, 4 hours each. So 16 hours of curriculum over a year. So preferably over 3 months to a year. And it guides you through 3 of the biggest theories that I've put together. And just as a quick summary, the 4 workshops are titled Getting Grounded, which is the foundational aspects of salutogenesis, the model, as well as mindfulness. The second workshop is devoted entirely to the art and science of generosity and gratitude. The third to compassion and self-compassion, again, with the science and current evidence and the skills. And the last one is on purpose, motivation, and meaning, which is based on Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, which I think people suffer from. They don't find purpose and meaning in what they're doing, even in the mundane.
Right.
And so when you help teach people the science and the evidence and give them skills and exercises to build those 4 areas, they're really known to be very good for proactive resiliency.
Well, so far I can tell you the people that know about this program or have gone through it, they can't say enough good things about it. It would be a goal of mine, hopefully, maybe in the near future, to be able to take this course myself. I think it would be awesome. I think it would be very beneficial for me. You mentioned that you have a partnership with Tema, and that's how this all came about. And how did you learn about Tema, or how have you found your relationship with Tema so far?
So Tema was really where I came out with mindfulness about 4 years ago. I did my first speaking engagement to first responders outside of the college, and I was really nervous, but they accepted a proposal, and so I introduced mindfulness, and I think I had 100 or more people in that session, and it was so well received. So Tema feels like home, and it's my give back, because it was a place I felt, secure and safe to talk about this, and people were well received. And I didn't really know of any other organizations in the first responder community. And so as I've gone through this journey of a master's and research and retired, I thought, who better than to work with than Tema? And so I'm so touched by the story of Tema, the family, impressed with Vince and what he's done. And he's such an amazing example of how a moment of incredible tragedy for him that really tore his world apart. Look at what he's done.
Yeah.
It speaks so much to adversity. While it may be difficult and it may, bring your world down in the moment and around it, it doesn't need to be the end of the story. It can be the platform for new things to happen if you've got courage and, the resiliency and the thought and the belief that you can do something purposeful with the tragedy that happens.
Yeah, he's pretty special. I mean, the whole organization is pretty special. I have yet to find, or I haven't experienced an organization where everybody who's involved with it is awesome. Like, they're all like superstars or superheroes. It's amazing to be surrounded by them. Like when we were there, and I was there for the first time being, embedded in it. It's overwhelming, the amount of support and I can't even explain the positive feeling that you get, but it is overwhelming. It's just, they're awesome.
It's just, you're right. It's genuine, authentic connections with people that care and care deeply. And so you feel that, strong desire to really want to make a difference. And that's empowering for the rest of us. And when you show up and feel welcome, who doesn't want to be there? And you're right. It's hard not to give back. And so this is a way for me to give purpose and meaning to my whole life and give back in a way that I hope inspires other first responders to take my thesis, take what I do. I'm happy to mentor anybody and give it away, because I'm at an age where I can't be around forever to change this. So anybody listening, if you're inspired to do stuff, I am happy to engage anybody in a conversation if I can help you with a study, help you with research, lend you some materials to read, direct you in a certain area with all the stuff I now know. Please call me.
Thank you for that. How have you found so far that R4R has been received so far? What's been your feedback?
Excellent. Really good. I think 2 services I think are looking to bring it in. Centennial College actually adopted R4R. So the first year students in the paramedic program leave first year with R4R in their pockets, the entire certificate paid for by the college. Mm-hmm. I'd ideally like to see it become standard in the college level where it belongs, so that we don't have to train up services after, that we start day one teaching people, giving them the skills to deal with what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, it should be a part of the curriculum for every first responder-based training school. It should be. Yes,
it should be. And anybody out there who's got a link to curriculum or wants to hook me up, I'm happy to talk to people. But it's so reasonably priced through TEMA. It's meant to be affordable and accessible. I have a different rate for corporate, but for first responders, it's totally accessible. And TEMA and I are willing to travel anywhere across the country if you can get a group of 20 people. And they don't have to be all first responders. It can be support staff, your partner, spouses, because it's a universal approach to resiliency. It's not first responder specific curriculum. It is a resiliency program.
Are you going to be coming to St. John's, Newfoundland in June?
You have no idea. That's at the top of my travel list. I'm hoping to, yes.
Yeah, you got to. That'd be awesome. I don't know if I'm going to be there yet or not. I hope to be, but yeah, that would be awesome. That would be great.
Yes, I would love to be there.
So you have, like you said, you have a unique perspective on this with your background in education, Wendy. How do you think, as a community of mental health advocates specifically geared towards the well-being of first responders, how do you think we're doing? How do you think we're doing so far?
Okay, so I think because of my bones, I'm proactive. To me, there's so much stuff that's reactively in place, and there's so much attention to being reactive. So, let me make this clear. I'm not suggesting for a nanosecond that that's not needed. When people are injured, they need support, and there needs to be programs and therapy. But we're no longer blind to the risk that this job presents to psychological well-being. And with that knowledge, I can't imagine another dollar being spent on a reactive treatment without spending $2 on something proactive. If we know the risk is there, what are we doing to address it before it injures people? So from that perspective, I don't think we're doing a great job.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot of work left to do.
Yes. So, I think before I leave this earth, I think the tides will change and people will. I wrote this article. I don't know if you read it, but I talked about drown proofing. You don't teach people to swim without teaching them to drown proof first. Mm-hmm. So why are we sending first responders into the face of trauma repeatedly without teaching them how to manage their emotions?
Good question. That's a great question. I don't know why we would continue to do that, knowing what we know now. Wendy, if someone wants to contact you or hook up with you on social media, how can they do that?
So through my company, wellthmanagement.ca, or on Twitter, I have 2 accounts, at WLund100 is kind of my academic one. The company one is Work with Heart, WM. And I don't know, should I give my phone number out? Is that appropriate?
You can if you like. I'm not going to say what kind of calls you're going to get, but you can if you want. You can if you want to.
What's your audience like?
all my audience is awesome. They should be awesome. They'll be respectful.
647-531-8881. And Wendy at wellthmanagement.ca, or you can reach me through tema.ca. Somebody there would know how to get a hold of me.
Right.
But
thank you
feel
for
like I'm not
being so accessible. That's important.
For anybody, call.
Thank you for that, Wendy. So I'm going to hit you with this question now. So if there's someone listening who's struggling on any level, if they were sitting in front of you, what would you say to them?
First of all, take care of yourself from, if you need therapy, get help, call TEMA, whatever resources you have. If you're in serious trouble, get that. But I would also suggest that in my own life and so many others we watch, moments of, or even periods in our life that are really challenging and difficult and feel dark and heavy can be the growth plate for better things. And so I remind myself when I have a significant suffering CV, and again, it's not the quality of it, it's how we're feeling as we experience things. But it's possible to take your experience, first get well, take care of yourself, get through the mud, and then know that you have every new moment offers a new opportunity to think about it differently, to feel about it differently, and to frame it differently. And it's all possible because your mind is bigger and stronger and more creative than you can ever imagine. And don't always believe your thoughts, because that
for sure.
tells us stuff that's not true.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, if we know that we have suffered a mental injury or emotional injury, why would we then rely on that injured part to give us good info?
Right.
We don't expect our broken arm to throw a ball.
Right.
And
in fact, you know that your broken arm will get better. We frame that fracture with a positive slant, knowing it will heal. There may be a scar, there may be aches and pains, but it will heal. And so this notion of impermanence can be a powerful one, trusting that nothing stays the same. That's not a guarantee that it's going to be easy and quick, but when you can trust the journey and trust, in mindfulness circles, we use the lotus flower. It's everywhere. And it's symbolic because in Buddhism, they say, no mud, no lotus. Lotus flowers do not bloom unless the roots are deep and dark and without sun. And it is in the mud that fertilizes the bloom.
Wow.
No mud, no lotus.
Huh. Thank you for that. Wendy, you are awesome. I can't even begin to tell you how awesome you are. What I want to tell you, and I want to speak for all first responders, I'm just going to do that right now. So I want to thank you because you are priceless. You are like such an invaluable resource for first responders. We need people like you. We have to have people like you in order to make any headway in this.
I would say ditto, Sean, but thank you for that. Everybody offers their own unique experiences, and we all can learn from each other for sure. Yeah. Thank you for kind words.
But, we need people like you that can break our brain and know the science behind all of this, that can show us the scientific proof of what we're going through and how to get through it.
And the good news is I don't write tests anymore, so you don't have to suffer with my, multiple choice questions anymore.
I'm extremely thankful that I had never had to write one of your exams. Thank you, Wendy. Please take care of yourself and everyone around you, and it has been a pleasure, and I hope I get to chat with you again soon and see you again soon, hopefully at another time of event.
Thank you, Sean, and I always like to end off with a metta phrase, which is loving kindness meditation, but may you all be free from psychological injury now and forever.
Amen. Amen to that. Thank you, Wendy. It's been
You're
awesome.
Welcome.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.
Now my shift is finally over. I gotta deal with what's mine.
I don't know how you guys feel right now, but I can tell you that for me, after this chat with Wendy, I felt like I'd been through a really cool introductory course in PTSD and mental wellness. I'm very grateful for her coming on and dropping all that knowledge on us. So thank you, Wendy, for taking the time. I reached out to Wendy just to see what she may have going on lately, and she wanted to know that she just finished with a group of Year 1 students at Centennial College, paramedic students. Now all 40 of them have the entire R4R certificate, all complete before Year 2 and before their first ride out, their ride time. So that's awesome. Wendy's super proud and happy about it. I'm proud of her for doing it. It's a step in the right direction to get to these first responder students early and start teaching them about this stuff. Also, she'd like you to know that May 3rd in Calgary, there'll be an R4R, or Reach for Resiliency course. So you can look her up on her website if you're interested in that, and see how you can get involved and get on that course. Okay. Thanks to all my listeners who support the podcast and who regularly share the podcast and leave comments and feedback. Thank you. It's very important. It helps me gauge the direction for the podcast, and it also gets the podcast recognized on social media, which helps get it out there to more of an audience, which is what we need to do. What I hope to do is, to get this out to as many people as possible. So thank you. I do appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, like our Facebook page. That would be great. Obviously, we still have our Facebook page contest going, so as soon as we get to 1,000 page likes, we're going to give away 5 Tema swag bags. Random draw from the 1,000 followers. That would be awesome. So if you already like the page, share it if you can, and try to get more likes. Try to get some more likes because you're in on this draw as well. So I appreciate that. And thanks for those of you who have done that so far. And that's about it. That's all I got for this episode. So, I'll talk to you again in a couple weeks. Until then, take care of yourself and each other. More love, less judgment.
'Cause we ain't superheroes, we're just ordinary people trying to make the difference and the first on every scene. And it's a